This episode is sponsored by JMR Rentals, professional digital cinema and broadcast rentals in Brooklyn, New York. To find out more, visit their website, jmrny.com. Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend, where we go behind the scenes and talk to the creators of independent entertainment. I'm Jason Godbey, and this is part 2 of our coverage of We Are One, a global film festival. Joining me now via Zoom to talk about some of the films that he reviewed for us, he is the founder of the I Actually Paid to See This blog, Mr. William Hammon. Welcome back, Bill.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, thanks for coming back on the cast, man. You covered a lot of stuff for We Are One Film Festival. A lot of movies. You wrote up all of the animated shorts, which there were a ton of, plus a couple of features. So I want to talk to you about that. And but first, let's get your overall impressions. Like, what did you think of the festival?
I think it was an amazing idea to bring all these different disparate festivals together, especially this is the prime time of the year to do them. If there's one critique, it's like I wish it was more the actual festivals rather than a showcase of stuff they've done before. Like I would have loved, the sneak peeks at the kind of films that would have been in Tribeca, would have been in Cannes, but are either delayed or not going to happen. But that's a minor gripe. It's still, the closest look any of us lay people get into these extremely prestigious affairs. So I was more than happy with it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it will have to do, like a lot of it has to do with streaming rights. And, as I said in the preview episode, a lot of these people, they're looking for, if it's a major, Hollywood film or even an indie with some names attached to it, they're looking for distribution. They don't want to give it away for free on YouTube. So I'm sure, and the other thing I said last week was the politics and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure they had last minute dropouts. I'm sure that there was a lot of arranging to do. And that's why we didn't get any advertising until the week of, so it's an interesting experiment. I'm wondering about festivals in the future and what they'll need, and is streaming going to be a part of them and where we're going to be at. But I think all in all, I think they did a great job. There's a lot of great films. Let's start to get into the films. So you covered it was like 3 days of animated shorts from the Annecy Film Festival, which is in France. Can you kind of give a little, for people not familiar, can you give a little background on that festival and kind of what it means?
The Annecy Festival, Annecy being the town where it takes place, a lot of the international nominees that you'll see at the come Oscar time for the animated shorts or the live actions, Annecy is usually their first major showcase, and it's where they kind of basically build their resumes. You've had films like last year's I Lost My Body, won at Annecy, Coraline, smaller short films like We Can't Live Without Cosmos. Like, this is their proving ground.
Yeah, so it's an Oscar qualifying prestige film festival. And it's like a precursor. It's like the SAG Awards or something like that for animation. So can you tell us about, I know you reviewed a lot of films, but can you give us a breakdown and throw out some of the ones that really stood out for you?
The first day was focusing on DreamWorks, which really isn't a major player when it comes to animated shorts yet. They're much more focused on features, How to Train Your Dragon, Shrek, those sort of things. But over the last couple of years, they've made a foray into the short film arena, and they're using their money to kind of basically encourage their artists to come up with original ideas, kind of how what Pixar does. So the three that were shown, you had Bilby, you had Marooned, and then they led off with the third one called Bird Karma. All of those were done in the last about 3 years ago. And while they never competed at Annecy, they were shown as part of the opening and closing ceremonies of the festival. Because this was basically DreamWorks saying, like, hey, we're legit now. We're announcing ourselves in the animated short realm. Bird Karma, to me, was the best of the three. It was very simple and, like the best Disney and Pixar shorts, largely silent. It's better when the characters can basically speak for themselves through their actions, because that's what the medium of animation does. It was very quick. You had these low resolution reeds. You see some fish jumping about, and then this crane comes in, this very silly looking design crane, and he just eats the fish until he finds a golden fish that can actually make color explode all around him. And it's like, oh my goodness, what is this? And all the time, the whole while, the background is coming into sharper focus. Every second, the film gets more and more defined, gets crisper, gets sharper. And that's kind of like the trick that they're playing on you with your eyes. You're getting this moral tale about, excess and living beyond your means and not destroying the beauty around you, and you're actually watching it form around you. That is some amazing artistic detail and creative thought. Bird Karma and Bilby both got shortlisted for the short feature Oscar a couple years ago. Didn't get nominated, but they were in the short list of 10. Marooned it's basically a shorter, more cutesy version of WALL-E, but it's still got a lot of good stuff behind it as far as the visuals and the overall morality of the film. The second day, this is where we get more independent, more experimental stuff. I really loved one called The 1 Minute Memoir, which basically it was 15 minutes long, but it was 15 different famous animators getting to tell 1 minute long stories. The best among them, Bill Plimpton, if you've ever seen his surreal, dark sense of humor. In recent years, he's done a couple of couch gags for The Simpsons. He has a very twisted mind. So telling a 1 minute story about how he learned to love drawing and the irony of how his parents fostered it and then tried to not foster it, it's a hilarious bit of like scribbling pencil sketch, dark humor that I just absolutely adored. And then the third day was showcasing the National Board of Canada. They did, over the course of about 6 years, a new fairy tale, basically, about a boy named Leon who has the face of a bear and this medieval kingdom he saves, but there's all these little fun elements of storytelling, stop motion that go into it. And initially it was just one short called Leon in Winter, and then it goes, let's a couple years later, let's do the princess Molly in springtime, let's do the villain in the summertime, and they complete this 4-season cycle over the course of 6 years. Every single one feeds into the other one. It ends up creating a grand mythos, and you get some amazing character development, even for the bad guys. All of this basically an original story feeding on fairy tale influences. Similar to what Laika did a few years ago with Kubo and the Two Strings. It's a very heavily influenced tale of Japanese folklore, but they actually wrote a completely original story.
You saw a film that I didn't. You saw this film called Ticket of No Return, which has actually been out for a while. It was more of like a highlight film for the festival. But talk about that a bit.
So this was put on by the Berlin Film Festival. Ticket of No Return is actually from 1979, so it predates a lot of us. But this was a really fine example of the German New Wave, and you hear a lot about the French New Wave, like Francois Truffaut in the 60s and 70s. Germany had their own New Wave that didn't get as much attention, but I remember seeing this film on a list, like a Roger Ebert style, like 1,000 films to see before you die, years ago. And I've been looking for it ever since. So the moment that I saw this on the list, like, oh my God, I'm watching this. I'm finally going to get to watch this. Because the director, Ulrich Ottinger, she was very dangerous in her time, being an openly lesbian, iconoclastic filmmaker in Soviet bloc Germany. Like, this wasn't just out of the ordinary. Her life was on the line with everything she did. And Ticket of No Return, that's kind of like just a more polished English title. The actual translation of the title is Portrait of a Drinker, or Portrait of a Drunk Woman. And the film plays like a combination of The Lost Weekend or Leaving Las Vegas if it was directed by Fellini. It's got that surreal, almost grotesque aesthetic to it, but it's framed in the idea that, revolutionary for its time, the double standards that we attach to women, especially in polite society. We can celebrate anti-heroes in these other movies where alcoholism is a huge factor, but there's a different set of rules applied to women. Now, the star of the film, Tabia Blumenschein, she passed away just a couple of months ago, back in March. She was one of the lead actresses in Ottinger's stable. Used her for about 3 or 4 films over the years. So she plays the main character, but she has no name. She's only referred to as she or madam or some other female pronoun. You can kind of guess via flashbacks and more theater of the absurd type of scenes that she was fired from her job for being drunk. So she decides to basically take a lost weekend and just go to Berlin and drink herself into a stupor. That's the ticket of no return. She buys a one-way ticket to Berlin. She's planning to drink herself to death. But the entire way, she's hounded by this teetotaling trio, a Greek chorus, which also don't have names. They have character traits. They're called like accurate statistics and common sense rather than actual names. And so wherever she goes to have a cognac, this trio is alongside just kind of talking as if she's not there. It's like, oh, did you know that if you're an alcoholic, you're 84% more likely to die of liver failure? I did not know that. It's this ever-present social judgment that even if it's not directly pointed at you, it's so passive-aggressive that it pervades everything you do and just boxes you in. So you have this main character who is so nouveau riche. She's wearing a different glamorous outfit in every single scene, like she stepped right off a runway. But she's also getting completely plastered, hearing it from all sides about in a vacuum as to what she's doing wrong, but she's also showing her own humanity by befriending a homeless woman and basically treating her to a weekend of luxury and hanging out with her friends, whether they're tramps or underground LGBT. Like, you're getting through her this amazing lens into Cold War European life. Because again, for those that can't picture in their head, Berlin, while it was separated into East and West Berlin, the city was deep in East Germany. So even if you crossed the Berlin Wall into West Berlin, you couldn't go to West Germany. It was still isolated. So it's challenging every perception, every rule as to what you should and shouldn't be behind the Iron Curtain. And this is the first of a loose trilogy thematically that's called the Berlin trilogy that Ulrich Oettinger did decades ago. But yeah, like this has been on my personal list to see for years, and I was not disappointed one bit. Like the fact that the main character never says a word, mimes only when she feels like she's speaking, or there's like a weird omniscient voiceover whenever she's supposed to be talking. There's so many weird and what's the word I'm thinking of? Just quirky, avant-garde characterizations. I mean, a large sequence of flashbacks is introduced by a little person bringing in a portrait of her and placing it next to her on a bench. I was like, yeah, this is something that Fellini would do, that Antonioni would do. Like, this is exactly right in their wheelhouse. But again, because of her unique perspective, Ulrich Oettinger is saying this is the woman's perspective of this that no one else is willing to show. And I absolutely was 100% behind it.
Yeah, it sounds like a really interesting film. And, reminiscent of something like Leaving Las Vegas, you wonder if the filmmakers, that this was an inspiration for them, to do with Nicolas Cage and Elizabeth Shue, very similar in plot kind of thing. Sort of guy goes to Vegas to drink himself to death, and it's more serious. There's not the quirky factor. It doesn't have that sort of Fellini-esque factor, but you do see someone in ruination, like a person in decline, so to speak. So we're going to move on to our next feature, which was Mystery Road, which played toward the end of the festival out of Australia. I felt like this is a picture that would probably get some play in America, but we haven't seen it. You mentioned in your review that it even has a series based on it. Give us a breakdown of it. Tell us what the movie's about and give us your thoughts.
Well, you were talking earlier about the idea that, some of these are just films that didn't get the right kind of distribution. I think Mystery Road kind of falls into that category because this is a movie from 2011 that has all the production values and artistic and thematic elements of any modern Western that would be put out by Hollywood. It's just set in Australia, and it deals with an Aboriginal cop. So it's maybe it would be a little bit difficult to find an audience here in the States to kind of understand that Indigenous aspect to it a little bit more, but it's very traditional in the way it's presented. And yeah, it was popular enough in Australia. It premiered at the Sydney Film Festival and got special screening at the Toronto Film Festival later that year in 2011. But it's popular enough that it got a sequel. I think it's called Goldstone. And then now there's a series, a TV series that just finished up its second season, all of which star the main actor here, Aaron Peterson, who plays Jay Swan, this detective in Winton, which is in I believe North Queensland, so like right on the edge of the outback. Very small community, but
and also
surrounded by desert.
A fan favorite, Hugo Weaving,
God,
the Matrix and Lord of the Rings fame, is in it as well. He plays another cop, and I thought it was an interesting story, and I liked the dynamic of it. I think there were certain things that were sort of uniquely Australian about it, but to me, it was like a Western. It was kind of like it was reminiscent of like the Coen Brothers' No Country for Old Men, and pictures like that. Like it was kind of like the Australian version of that. And, people forget that like most of Australia is not inhabitable. There's a huge area where there's no cities or anything. So I feel like this was kind of like a tale of the edge of civilization and stuff, and a unique point of view.
This struck me like an Australian version of Hell or High Water. Kind of, while the dynamic is slightly different. I mean, that's about two brothers, in essence, money laundering to save their property while they're being chased by the police. Mystery Road is much more internal with the police, but it's had that same kind of vibe to it where there's this relatability to the characters. You think you would see them on the streets at any given point. Like you can understand their worldview. This isn't just cops and robbers. This isn't just a murder mystery. It's got those great elements too, but whereas an American film would focus much more on the pursuit and the gunfights and the action of the story, Jay Swan is dealing with the conflict of not only trying to figure out how Indigenous girls are being killed, but because he's the one Indigenous member of this police force, he's dealing with a whole lot of racial insecurities from all sides. And American films touch on that here and there, but not really to the extent that this film does. And that may be why it seems more of an Australian film rather than an American film, because there's just a degree that we can't understand that because we just don't live in it. But that does translate in some ways that actually work really well. I wrote about this in the review. Every good Western interaction has a climactic gunfight. It's just part of the formula. But Australia has some very strict gun control laws. Basically, only police are allowed to have sidearms and pistols and handguns, but everybody's allowed to have like hunting rifles. So one of your main villains, he has a long-range rifle that he says he used to hunt kangaroos. In-depth, profound conversations between Peterson and Weaving about how old their rifles are. I think Peterson mentions his is like a .68 Winchester. It's like there's history, there's allegory to these weapons that when the big fight happens, you can see that they're actually quite awkward using the handguns, but when they're lining each other up in their scopes of their rifles, there's this increased dramatic tension that works well because they have to account for wind, they have to line them up in the crosshairs, and you can only take one shot at a time because you got to release the bolt and load the next one in. This cannot, by design, cannot be a shoot 'em up.
I thought it was really interesting too because you did get that sort of voyeuristic aspect. There were a lot of long shots, long lenses used to simulate gun scopes, and seeing the action from the detective's point of view when he's looking through, at the deal going down and so forth. I thought it was really interesting, and just a unique sort of point of view that we're not used to seeing, but still a very relatable story. I just wonder to see if it does get play here in the U.S. or if maybe this might be a film that somebody Americanizes at some point and just makes it into a Western, and just hires American actors or something like that. We actually said that about quite a few films in the festival, that if they do get popular, there might be American versions of them.
I'm hesitant as to what the quality would be, because one of the things I thought about while watching those scenes, especially, again, lining up in the scopes and everything, it reminded me of American Sniper a little bit. But that was much more jingoistic and rah-rah, go USA, where Clint Eastwood basically made this lionized hero out of Bradley Cooper's character. And the only humanism that the opposing Iraqi sniper got throughout the entire movie was one picture hanging on the wall in his background that showed he was an Olympic sharpshooter. Everything else was, go America, beat those savage terrorists. So an Americanized version of this film, I would like to see it, but I worry how much we would put a patriotic spin on it and make it just just another gun fest. Again, part of the beauty of this is that
it's not like a glorified police force, which is definitely an interesting conversation that people are having today. Is how glorified the police are in movies and so forth, and how that came to be. But it does seem like these are very down to earth, very realistic, very flawed people, and and interesting and very intriguing, and it's probably a little maybe slow paced for some American audiences, but I think if they could deal with that, they still get a good story.
I mean, the first half of the film, as far as the true murder mystery, honestly reminded me of some old school Twin Peaks. You get little bits of it here and there, so going, why is this girl dead? How could she have been killed? Who would do such a thing? And you're exploring this whole little town to find the quirks and unseemly character traits of the locals, like to basically create everybody as a suspect. That's, when you do a slow burn like that, it's really satisfying.
Yeah, I like that. I would definitely recommend, if people can catch it, they catch it. And maybe, where there's maybe on some streaming service they can catch the series, or maybe they got like a VPN that allows them to see Australian stuff from Netflix or something. But anyway, man, I got to wrap up. Thanks so much for doing this. Thanks for all your help on the film festival. For people who want to read more of your stuff and find out more about you, where can they find you on the web?
All right. My blog is actuallypaid.wordpress.com. As we kind of get through the first phase of the COVID pandemic and start opening back up, I've got some new content plans coming. So, and of course, just reviews and rants and my silly little opinion. So please check it out.
Yeah, and we'll definitely have you write more for us and do more shows like this, more reviews to bring you guys some more indie films. So thanks, Bill, and we'll see you soon. And that's all we have time for today. Thanks so much for taking this trip down the rabbit hole. For more of our content, including our movie reviews, visit our website, norestfortheweekendpodcast.com. Please be sure to like, rate, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Once again, want to give a shout out to our sponsor, JMR Rentals. You can find out more about them at jmrny.com. And, of course, I want to thank my guest, Bill Hammon. For Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.